how predictive analytics can improve your recruiting outcomes. My name is David, and I'll be your moderator for this session. We are joined today by Daria Friedman, Principal Talent Acquisition Analyst at Brandon Hall Group, and Jeanette Meister, Managing Director for WCN Americas. I would like to extend a thank you to WCN for sponsoring today's webinar. WCN is a highly rated cloud-based talent acquisition suite. They have decades of award-winning recruitment software expertise and an obsession with driving real change in organizations. Their products accelerate and improve the entire process of finding, attracting, engaging, assessing, and hiring the best talent. Be sure to visit their website at www.wcnsolutions.com. Before we get into the webinar, I wanted to tell you just a little bit about Brandon Hall Group. Brandon Hall Group is a research and analyst firm that empowers excellence in organizations around the world through our research and tools. Our vision is to inspire a better workplace experience. We have world-class research, data, and expertise across all areas of human capital management. Currently, we have open surveys in succession management, hiring and internal mobility, training benchmarking, and talent acquisition analytics. We would love to hear from you. In exchange, you could receive free gift cards, research, reports, and more. To participate, please visit our website at brandonhall.com and click Open Surveys. A few quick housekeeping items. This presentation is being recorded. The playback and slides will be provided to anyone within 24 hours of the webinar. If you'd like to ask a question, please do so by typing it into the questions box for our presenters. If you would like to download a copy of the presentation instantly, you may do so in the handout section. And now, I'll turn it over to our presenters so we can get started with the agenda.
Thanks, David. My name is Daria Friedman, and I'm Principal Analyst for Talent Acquisition at Brandon Hall Group. And it's really great to be here today, especially with Jeanette Meister, who's the Managing Director of WCN Americas. You know, I'm particularly excited about our topic today, how predictive analytics can improve your recruiting outcomes, which is really near and dear to my heart. I really feel that these analytics have the capacity to optimize your organization's decision-making process across your recruiting process. As you all may have realized, business decisions are becoming more and more data-driven. And with recruitment, there's a myriad of decisions ranging from which sources should I use to find talent, which candidates should I screen first, how much time will it take to make a hire, and of course, which candidate do I hire? These decisions are important because they impact quality of hire, spending, time to fill, and many additional talent acquisition outcomes. I know out there's a little bit of skepticism about predictive analytics, but let's not be afraid to really examine these analytics and get a closer look to see if there are any benefits that can be derived from them. First, we're going to get a grounding on predictive and prescriptive analytics overall, and then look at how they apply to talent acquisition, market demand, and their impact. Then Jeanette will provide us with a great case study showcasing improvement in outcomes and how to capitalize on predictive analytics. Of course, there's the Q&A session, so please send us your questions as we go along in the webinar, and we look forward to answering them. So let's start off with a poll. That's the way I always like to start these webinars. So here's a question to figure out what your initial thoughts are about predictive analytics. How important is it to source candidates using predictive analytics? Is it critical to your business, important, somewhat important, or not at all important? And so you don't have to be using predictive analytics to be able to answer that question. You just have to kind of use your imagination and think how they could benefit your organization and what your organization's reaction to it. So David, just let me know when just most of the participants have completed the survey.
Sure, Daria. We'll
How
give it
a
couple more seconds.
Okay. Looking forward to seeing everyone's response. think it's an easy question to answer.
Okay.
Okay, terrific. All right. So what we see here is that 18% feel it's critical to their business, 50% feel it's important, 32% somewhat important, and 0% not at all important. Actually, these results are a little bit better than what we found in our survey. So let's take a look at that. Okay, so the results of our survey show that about half of the organizations feel that predictive analytics is important to sourcing. And when you think about that, it's an amazing statistic, particularly because predictive analytics is relatively new phenomena to sourcing and recruiting. And while assessment providers have been using predictive analytics for a long time to identify which candidates would be a good fit for the organization based on the assessment test, the use of predictive analytics for different decision-making steps along the hiring and recruiting process is pretty new. And WCN is a great example of a provider offering predictive analytics to optimize recruiting. So in my opinion, we're only at the beginning of seeing the extent to which predictive analytics can be used for talent acquisition. So let's compare in the next slide the importance and effectiveness in using predictive analytics. So as an example of the newness for predictive analytics, while half the organizations, as we just saw before in the previous chart, feel predictive analytics are very important or critical to use, only 21% consider themselves to be effective or very effective at implementing those analytics. And that's a pretty big gap, but I think there's a big reason for that. That may be because there's a variety of factors. For instance, organizations may be just beginning to use predictive analytics and may be using it consistently for all the requisitions, or it just may be too early to see the results of the use of that data. So let's start our conversation a little bit further and get more detail on what is predictive analytics. And so Jeanette is going to explain further about what is predictive analytics overall.
Great, thank you, Daria. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. So we thought what we do now is talk a little bit more about, well, what exactly is predictive analytics? And in case you haven't heard, there really is an artificial intelligence revolution going on, which predictive analytics is part of. And last fall, I was flipping through Harvard Business Review, because it's one of my favorite magazines, and there was this great quote on artificial intelligence. It said, studies have shown that while humans can provide useful input, algorithms do better in the role of final decision makers. And I thought that was really interesting as we start to think about our everyday life. And, currently all around us, we have predictive analytics and artificial intelligence around us. And we're using this every day as consumers. So if we think about Amazon as an example, they use data to predict trends. They use data to predict trends of what we're going to buy. So here is a screenshot of my Amazon recommendations, and slightly embarrassing, but I share it because I think it makes a great point. So Amazon knew that I was late to the game and started binge watching all of the Twilight movies, after years after everyone else has. So it's recommending to me, on the bottom left that I should, buy the New Moon movie for a night in. And they knew with a high probability, there was a high likelihood that I was going to buy that based on not only my past buying trends, but others and other consumers' buying trends. They also recognize I have a 6-year-old daughter, and I was buying a bunch of books around girl power and empowerment, and so they're recommending to me I Am Jane Goodall. And you know what? I went ahead and I did buy both of those. So really great, predictive analytics and their algorithm. And I went ahead and made those purchases. And it's very personalized. So this was my screenshot of my recommendations. But if I look at WCN CEO's recommendation. Charles Hips, he's based out of London, and his recommendations for music, well, I don't even know what any of this is, to be perfectly honest. Not as interested myself on, learning more about JFK, because we lived that as an American. I know all of that, but, for him, this is very personalized to him versus mine, and that, is when we think about predictive analytics, it's trends, it can be, different personalized outcomes for others. So we're living this every day right now, and I thought that might be helpful to share with everyone to ground us. And if I think about further around predictive analytics, it is helping us massively improve the use and productivity of our assets in everyday life. We think of Google. Information assets are much better used because of their search algorithms. They're showing us the most relevant search terms based on what we're putting into those search terms and delivering information that's relevant to you as a consumer. Road infrastructure, we're using it better because of Google Maps and Waze algorithms. Our journeys are quicker, we're getting around places faster, and I jokingly but seriously say it also helps fighting. So me and my husband get along much better because of predictive analytics. So there's no fighting of which highway do we take to get where we're going. We can use an algorithm. It will tell us the best way because it's looking at all of the traffic and telling us the best way to get somewhere based on past experience and the input that we're putting in as drivers. Think of property assets. Airbnb, much better use. And last example is we think about drivers and cars, much better use because of Uber. We can quickly get somewhere by using drivers to come pick us up. And the future here, if we think of predictive analytics and algorithms, is really around driverless cars. The Times over the summer had headline, GM wants to drive the future of cars that drive themselves. And The Economist, again this summer, quote, self-driving cars have clocked up millions of miles while on roads while making autonomous decisions. And you think about predictive analytics, driverless cars and taking, information and trends and making decisions. I mean, that is ultimately the future for us as consumers. So, hopefully high level, this gives you a grounding on what predictive analytics is in our everyday life. But you're probably thinking, I thought we were talking about talent acquisition. So I'm going to turn it back over to Daria to talk a little bit about how this impacts, what we're really here for.
Thank you, Jeanette. That was absolutely great. So now let's look at predictive analytics specifically for talent acquisition. And so on the next slide, as Jeanette had mentioned, predictive analytics has been around a while and routinely used for consumer market. But now let's dive into talent acquisition. So predictive analytics is an area of statistics that deals with extracting information from data and using it to predict trends. And these are some of the predictive analytics that I've seen for talent acquisition. We have identified best candidates, which candidates are the best out of a slew of different kinds of applicants, the probability that the candidate would accept an interview, the probability of accepting an offer, tenure likelihood, and then another one that I've seen out there, time to hire. I think that's a particularly useful one. And so what's interesting about these analytics is that providers are developing or formulating these statistics in many different ways. For instance, they could base the analytics on the characteristics of high performers for a specific position, or on criteria set by your organization, or they could base it on past recruiter performance, or they could base it on continuous learning, and or finally they can base it on a combination of a lot of different criteria. And as Jeanette explained, these predictions are based on a proprietary algorithm or formula that takes into consideration all the different data points. Typically, providers display their analytics by using an index, a score, a percentage, or even some type of symbol that identifies the prediction, such as how likely is a candidate to be suited for the position. These projections may sound simple, but in fact, they help alleviate the recruiter from spending lots of time reviewing loads of resumes and coming up with the right decision. And another thing, what's important to remember about these analytics is that they are all statistical probabilities that a certain result will occur. And there's always that possibility, although it should be a slim possibility, that a different result will occur. Now, what are prescriptive analytics? So prescriptive analytics provides suggested decision options based on the predictive analytics. So examples are which job sites are best for promoting a position, or which candidate should be screened first, second, or third. And typically finding the best job sites is based on historical hiring success data. My recommendation here is just to continue to monitor the results by reviewing your dashboards to make sure you're getting the best percentage of quality hires from each job site. In terms of candidate priority levels, that could be based on your organization's hiring qualifications, past hiring successes, and the qualifications of all the candidates in the database. And again, you know, I'm one of these careful people. I would just scan the different priority levels just to make sure the right candidates are being prioritized. So what are the advantages of using predictive prescriptive analytics? And there are many of them, especially over human decision making. First, because the algorithms are data-driven, they have been tested and developed scientifically, the results are going to be consistent. There are no emotions or distractions to get away in the analytics, which is a good thing. Next, there should be no inherent biases or prejudices. Now, I know some of you may be skeptical because if the analytics were developed based on the organization's workforce, there may be some biases built in. However, I understand that the providers have algorithms built in to ensure that the candidates being recommended include underrepresented populations. In addition, these algorithms tend to be more inclusive because they take into consideration many more resumes than a human being can. And, you know, I know Jeanette is going to address this issue later on in the webinar. Next, I think the best practice of all is when the provider actually explains the reasoning behind the prediction. For instance, the provider may have assigned weight on the types of schools attended, the grades received, prior employers, and any other combination of criteria. So in my opinion, this particular best practice adds to the confidence of using predictive analytics. Additional benefits are that it speeds up decision making and it has the potential of making the hiring process more efficient. And in some cases, it greatly reduces the screening time. So I know, again, that this may spark some concern. If the solution automatically picks the sources or channels or prioritizes the candidate, what does the recruiter do? The recruiter's time can be focused on more productive practices instead of the repetitive, mundane tasks. For instance, the recruiter can spend more time communicating and or screening the candidates, or they can be personalizing the employer brand for each candidate, conferring with a hiring manager, networking, and making candidate-related decisions. These predictive analytics get rid of the tedious decision-making. So let's look at database decisions. And so, you know, one interesting statistic that came out of Brandon Hall Group's Workforce Management, Measurement, and Analytics Survey is that more than half of the organizations are already making database decisions for hirings. Or organizations are looking at screening scores, assessment scores, tenure at past employers, grades, cost per hire, time to hire, and a slew of other metrics. So it's important not to avoid using or be afraid of using analytics. Predictive analytics can save your organization money and resources by reducing time to fill, by finding more effective sources, and by optimizing the talent selection process. So let's go on to a fun question. Just get your feel for this. Have you adopted predictive analytics for hiring decisions? So the answers are, remind me, what's predictive analytics? Just beginning to use, established use. I'd be interested in seeing the results of this because we have a somewhat a similar question in our survey. So I want to see what you guys think. David, how are we doing?
We have just over half of the people submitted their questions, so we'll give it a couple more seconds, and I see them still coming in.
Okay, great. I'm really interested to see your responses. Oh my goodness, 28% still want to understand what is predictive analytics. And good to see that 64% are just beginning to use and 8% have an established use. Well, okay, so now let's look at how that compares with the market. So does the market need, what does the market need for predictive analytics and what's its impact? And so as you can see by this chart, it's also very evident that organizations need predictive data to be able to move quickly in the market. Here we see that 1/4 already have those analytics and another 42% don't have that data but feel they need them. So why do 2/3 of the organizations feel they need these analytics? And so they need them to improve quality of hire, to move quickly in the market, and to attract the talent they need. It's getting increasingly difficult to attract quality talent. Preliminary data from our 2017 hiring practices survey show that more than half of the organizations feel there is still a shortage of qualified talent in their industry. Organizations need all the solutions they can get, especially when there's a shortage in their industry. And so let's look at the need by size of organization. Next slide. Okay, so another interesting statistic that we found is that the bigger the organization, the more likely they are to need those statistics. Here we see that organizations with over 1,000 employees are much more likely, or almost twice as likely, than organizations with fewer employees to feel they need predictive analytics. And that makes a lot of sense. When your hiring needs are great, your volumes of resumes coming in are high, you're more likely to need data that will help you speed up the hiring process and make the process more efficient. And so let's see what the impact is on quality hire. So it's not only that speed counts, predictive analytics also impact the level of quality hires. Here we see two bars. The green bars represent those organizations that are effective at using predictive analytics, and the blue bar represents those that are not effective at using analytics. And the organizations that are effective are just about 45% more likely to get a higher level of quality hires than the organizations that are not effective at using predictive analytics. So predictive analytics does have a positive impact on the level of quality hires. And now Jeanette Meister from WCN will continue with a case study about how to capitalize on predictive analytics.
Terrific. Thank you so much. So wanted to show a couple examples of how we really think here at WCN predictive analytics changes the game for recruiting and can really deliver great and diverse hires. So I thought I would walk the group through 3 examples that some of the outcomes that our clients have seen. So one of our clients is a Fortune 100 client, and they were really having an issue with tackling talent scarcity, and it's a big issue where, you know, we want to hire a lot of new people, you can't find the right candidates for the roles, it's becoming, you know, we hear in the press of war on talent. So this was a big concern for this Fortune 100 client. And so they were able to, by using our predictive analytics tools and intelligence, have a 50% increase in new sources of their hires. And at the same time, they were also able to tap into their existing talent pool and mine it in a way to expand out the sources. So they had a fantastic outcome once they started using predictive analytics by opening up the sources. So that's one great example of delivering great talent. Another example is a Fortune 250 organization, and they were very focused on increasing diversity. It's a hot topic. You know, there's lots of research that's been done. The more diverse your organization is, you're more innovative. So this is something that many of our clients are looking to increase the diversity of their organization. And so this Fortune 250 client was able to, within 1 year, increase their diversity hires by 14%. And at the same time, they knew, just as Daria had alluded to before, one of the great things about predictive analytics and algorithms is that you can reduce bias, because you can literally take out any sort of unintended biases in your recruiting process and have literally analytics deliver, not think about, they're pulling it out. It doesn't matter if you're male or female or whatnot. So from that, again, 14% increase. And then lastly, one of my favorite examples of predictive analytics is one of our clients. They're 80,000 size employees. They're a big retailer, and they hire a ton of people, especially around the holiday seasons. And for them, it's really important to hire really great people, but quickly. And so they were able to get their time to hire down to 3 days through predictive analytics and automation and scoring, which is an incredible result for them. And they sort of even took it further, where when a candidate applies, instantly within 35 minutes, going through the process, a candidate can be scheduled for an interview. Within the next day, they're in for their actual interview, and again, 3 days to have that offer and time to hire. And it goes even further, where if that candidate has worked for this organization before and goes to reapply, again, they worked during the Christmas season, now they want to work for this retailer during Easter, within 5 minutes, they can have an offer right then and there. So really, that's, the power of, quickly delivering great talent. Our clients have seen that. So, hopefully that is helpful in bringing to life for those, I think it was 20-something% that's like, what is predictive analytics? So here are some, great examples of it used for talent acquisition. So the next question that we always get is, well, how can I capitalize on predictive analytics? That sounds great, and everything Daria's been talking about, this sounds great, but how can we start to use this in our organization? So I thought I'd talk a bit about that, as how you can capitalize that. And we'll take sort of make a bold statement of, what if you could instantly predict who you would hire? Look into your technology, and it could tell you instantly who you're going to hire. And we actually at WSync can do that. And so we have a predictive recruiting scoring algorithm that literally does that and allows enterprises to zero in on the right candidates faster. So let me show you what it looks like, because that's always the next question. So here's a quick screenshot of a list of candidates, and our decision intelligence algorithm literally will score and rank and ultimately explain the probability of a candidate receiving an interview or even an offer. And so here's a list. You pull up a list of the candidates, and you can instantly know who you want to interview or make offers to. And we do this with 90% accuracy. So here we have Dan Huber, and it's, the system is telling you 91% accuracy, 91% probability that you would want to interview this candidate. So that's, that's really great. But we take it a step further and not just show you your list of candidates with the scores. And you can click into Dan and look into his profile, and we have some insights that really explain why. Why is our algorithm saying, Dan has a 91% chance of being interviewed by your organization, and his offer probability, you can see at the top, is 75%. So we look at things, our algorithm looks at things from, someone's education, whether it's their university, their degree result, their SAT scores, GMATs, whatever, those typical things a lot of organizations look at. We look at, of course, work experience, where they've worked, what sort of role, and things like other achievements. So were they, captain of their hockey team? Did they get a certain scholarship? Were they the first in their family to put themselves through college? Do they self-fund themselves? Things like that. And then also we can wrap in all different test scores and assessments. And so look at all of these data points and more. And that explains, why, to get people comfortable with, well, why is someone coming up with this high probability? And we at WCN, we're very focused on our algorithm on early career candidates, college students, if you will, who, frankly, don't have a really, thick resume. It's pretty thin. They've been to college, they've had maybe a few internships, they've done some things in high school, but it's very, thin compared to obviously someone who's been in the workforce for 10 years. And we are able to, with 90% accuracy, come up with these probabilities because our organization is very focused on early career candidates. And so I think that's been very powerful for our clients. And this is really based on, machine learning. So I think the really, cool thing about this is that our algorithm is continuously learning. And so like a person, it gets smarter. So if you do certain actions and you end up hiring a certain candidate over another, the algorithm learns that it knows and lives and breathes, just like, you have a child who's learning and breathing and you're teaching it. So I think that's a really important point. And I think the other thing that's important is that currently our algorithm can predict, a third of an organization's hires, as I said, with 90% accuracy. But we've started to work with some of our clients to really personalize that algorithm further and not just take, our algorithm, but put in information from their organization. So things like performance data, their specific recruiting outcomes for their organization. I mean, the list is absolutely endless. And we have one organization, when we started to make this highly personalized to their organization, we were able to get up from just being able to predict a third of their hires to, I think it was 65 to 70% of their hires, which is huge. Because again, you can imagine if instantly the second a candidate applies, you knew if they were going to hire them, that would be pretty powerful. So that's where we are with our algorithm. And those outcomes. And I think one point I just want to make, and I'm going to talk about this a little bit more later on, is when we start to pull in an organization's specific data, like their recruiting outcomes, like their performance data, it's really important, and we do a really good job of this, is of ensuring that there's no unintended bias in the algorithm. So Daria touched on it earlier, and I've mentioned it already, but you may have, unintended hiring bias in your selection process, or possibly in your organization on who gets promoted and whatnot. And so we can take any of those biases out to ensure that the algorithm and the scoring doesn't have any of these biases that, for better or worse, at times humans do. So I wanted to just really make that point. And so we like to think of our algorithm in some ways as Waze, and I think this is a good analogy. So it's an expert system, like we are using Waze, and it's really helpful if you're going somewhere, you're going on a business trip somewhere, and you're driving, you've rented a car, you've never been there, and you're relying on Waze or something similar to figure out where to go, and it's invaluable, and you're so happy you have that. But if you're driving around locally around your town, you know where to go. You don't need to use Waze. You know your shortcuts, and you don't need to use Waze. And so we think of that as, our predictive scoring algorithm the same way. If you and your organization is starting to look at new sources, maybe you're doing college recruiting and you're starting to consider some new schools to go out and look at those candidates, you can use this tool because it's unknown terrain. You might not know what a great candidate looks like at a certain university. But if you've been going to a certain university for years, you can override it. You can almost ignore the probability because you know that source really well. You could think of that as well with certain employers. So maybe you tend to hire a lot of candidates from a certain employer. They're a great feeder for you, and you know that. But maybe you start to get a lot of applications from another company and you don't know that the training that a candidate is getting from there. So again, really helpful in unknown terrain, unknown sources. And again, as I mentioned, like Waze, which pulls in data from different sources, we too, again, can pull in data and process additional information, whether it's business data, performance, retention, tests and questionnaires, and all sorts of social data, even levels of engagement by your candidate. So it's sort of, we can put in a whole lot of different information. And then again, as I said, just like Waze learns from our decisions, and so does our algorithm. So hopefully that clears up a bit of what an algorithm can and can't do and what ours does. A lot of questions I usually get is, well, how do you create a great predictive analytic algorithm? So I'll head off. Usually we get these questions on these webinars, so I'll sort of geek out for a couple minutes, maybe even less than a couple of minutes, and just to explain quickly how you create an algorithm. So for us, it's important to, you have to create a brain that's observing and learning and can replicate behavior. And you have to base it on billions of data points. It can't just be a small data set. It has to be a big, big, big data set. And for us, we base it on successful and unsuccessful candidates in the marketplace. And so that's how we created our brain. And the next point, which I've said already, but I'm going to hammer it home because at WCM we feel very passionately about this, is that you have to make sure that your brain has really good behavior and it has no unintended adverse impact, no unintended biases. And then if it does, just like with a kid and you're teaching your child or to behave properly, if they're not, you put them in a timeout chair and you check and you fix and you correct the behavior. So it's the same thing with creating your brain. You have to make sure this brain has the proper behavior, and you have to keep checking it to ensure as it's continuously learning and behaving just like you do with a child. You don't do one time out. You have to continuously ensure that has a good behavior. So that's the 3 steps to creating and keeping a great predictive analytic algorithm. So hopefully that also is helpful. So let's go back to some of the fun stuff. And I thought just in the last little bit I would just talk a bit more about, what you can do when you can instantly predict who you're going to hire with a high probability. One of the big things we see with our clients is that you have limits on, you only have so many recruiters on your team and only so many resources, and therefore you're only going to certain sources for your candidates. But with an algorithm like this, just to score up candidates, there's literally no capacity. You have unlimited capacity, and you can completely widen your sources of hires. So again, if you're concerned around, and I hear this from some organizations, they won't post certain jobs on their websites because they're worried about the flood of applications coming in and they can't handle the volume. A lot of professional services companies do that with college recruiting. They only go to certain schools, and if you don't go to that university, you're sort of out of luck unless you can get in through a referral. And so they do that because they don't have the resources. But this way, you can literally have as many applications as, open up the floodgates, post to new job boards, try out new social networks. You don't have to be as conservative in your sourcing methodologies and trying new things because, the predictive, scores come up and can help you zero in on that top talent faster. So we thought we'd do another quick poll. Question: 60% of the top 1,000 CEOs have graduated from how many universities? Do you think it's 15, 75, or 250? So we'll give it a few seconds and everyone can tell us what you think. How are we doing on the numbers, David?
We're just about slowing down, so I'm going to go ahead and close the poll and share the results.
Hey, great. So, looks like 52% of you said 15, 39% of you said 75 universities, and 9% said 250. So, you were right. It is 15. And so I'm going to have to stop using this stat because I think a lot of people are starting to know what the stat is. And to me, it's really incredible because if you think about it, 15 universities. So I was talking about the different sources. How many candidates that you might be missing out because you're only focusing on certain sources. And, to me, you want to make sure when you're recruiting top talent that you're not just focusing on a limited source. You want to open it up and not miss anyone. You can have, you think about who are you leaving out of, your recruiting process. And with the scoring, you can zero in and quickly find those best candidates. There's no black hole if you're getting tons of applications and trying to dig out those top and screening through, let the technology do a lot of that heavy lifting and don't miss anyone. And the second piece, and again, I know I'm keep hammering in on this, is that, with the algorithm, you can tune out any adverse impact of your current selection process. And I think that is critically, critically important. Connecting and engaging with candidates first. I mean, if you think about this, the instant a candidate applies, if you know that, 91% shot that you're going to actually give them an offer, you can absolutely connect with them faster. Instantly they apply, schedule them in for an interview. If, on the flip side, maybe you don't want to automate that much, you can then have a recruiter pick up the phone, call that candidate instantly, they get the notification, start engaging with them. You could have, one of your business leaders or an important hiring manager call up that candidate. So you can really start to, earlier in the process, immediately connect and engage. And this, this can also be used, our algorithm, not just on applications to jobs, but also for events. So recruiting event RSVPs, a candidate RSVPs. Now, it won't be as good because we don't have all the application data and resume data. We're working on making that even better. But even if you knew maybe with not 90% accuracy, but like a 60% accuracy, someone who was highly likely to receive an offer and interview, you could start engaging with them and keeping them warm. Think about those passive candidates until they're ready to make a switch. You know that this is a fabulous candidate for your organization. I mean, the options here are just unlimited in how you can engage with candidates and keep them really warm for your organization. And then, of course, it goes without saying, this completely saves recruiter time. So, for an organization, if you conservatively say you have 10 recruiters and maybe you spend 2 months per year on screening, we all know that's probably much, much more. But let's just say 2 months, that's for 10 recruiters, you're saving 20 months of time. I mean, what would you do with that time? Well, I know what I would do. I used to actually run Credit Suisse campus recruiting globally, and I would take that time for the recruiters and have them really personalize the process. Pick up the phone to the candidates, connect more with people within the business and hiring managers, think about recruiting strategy. I mean, there's so much time that can be spent on really value-add activities, and let technology take care of the admin burden that goes with recruiting. So I will leave you with this before we move to questions. In the future, the question is, will there be a court one day in the future that says to us, what, you let a human make a decision as it relates to recruiting? And we say this like a little bit jokingly, but in all seriousness, if we think about, in our everyday lives, now if there's an unfortunate plane crash, something, they check the black box, they check things, the first question that comes up was, did the pilot override the computer, override the system? And, I've heard someone told me recently that there's an airlines that actually can make it where a pilot can't even override the computer, even if they wanted to. And so this is, we're not here for talent acquisition now. We certainly won't be in the next year, but somewhere down the road, whether it's 5 years, is it 10 years, how many years, will it be where, let the algorithm make those decisions instead of a human, because it can do a better job, just as Harvard Business Review, the quote from earlier on today. So with that, we can open it up for questions.
Great, thank you, Jeanette. And I think you answered a lot of questions because 28% of those people said, what is predictive analytics on the line? So I think you did a great job explaining it. And we do have several questions. So just a reminder to everybody, you can use the questions box in your GoToWebinar box on your screen to insert a question. So Jeanette, I have a big picture question here from Bob. Based on what you've seen at leading organizations, what are the most important lessons that they've learned from using predictive analytics for hiring decisions? How have they changed their hiring practices from these lessons, and what are the biggest initial impact?
That is a great question. That's a big, meaty question. So I'll try and break it down in a couple parts. I think, there's a couple pieces, and there's a few organizations that are coming to mind. When we start to use that, it's really the combination of expanding the sources to find overlooked talent. And so, in particular, we have a number of clients that are in high volume recruiting, where they're trying to hire the same type of a profile of a candidate. And they want to do it quickly, and so by them being able to really identify great the matching talent for them outside their core sources, that was been a huge huge game changer for them. So I think that's a big piece. Big picture is expands out sources and ultimately bringing in great candidates over time. There was a second part to that question. Oh, go ahead.
Okay, so what I've seen is that actually the recruiting process has been changed. So whereas, the recruiters were mostly screening every single applicant that comes in, now they only get to screen the ones that are identified as the best candidates. So I think that's a big change in terms of workflow. That's one change I've seen.
Absolutely. We've seen the same as well.
Right. And then to speak to your point about expanding sources, I saw one particular company, large financial services company, they were only recruiting from the Ivy League colleges, and all of a sudden they were able to expand their reach and actually recruit candidates and college grads, etc., from a huge number of universities. So that really expanded the opportunity to get the best candidates and not to miss anyone. So I thought that was an excellent move. Jeanette, do you have any?
Yeah, I absolutely. I was actually just thinking as you were speaking, like it could possibly have almost been the same client, because we have similar things with, again, and I guess what I was starting to refer to with the expanding of sources. It's instead of having just the Ivy Leagues, it's finding those great candidates outside of those, and not limiting it. So yeah, I think we're seeing absolutely the same thing in the marketplace, and we'll as time goes on, we'll get more and more fantastic examples. So Bob, we can follow up with you as the data keeps coming in.
And we actually had a question come in twice by Julian and Colleen. What is the role of the recruiter if AI makes all the decisions in the future? So the second question was, are recruiters worried about losing their jobs? So I bundled those two together for you.
That's a great question, and I hear that a lot. No, the recruiter is still going to be around, absolutely. They just are not going to have the huge administrative burden they do right now. I mean, for me, I like to think of this technology as like this fantastic assistant that can show you quickly the great candidates, who they are, and then the recruiter can do the fun stuff, which is, in my mind, personalize the process, connect with the candidates, make sure those candidates are engaged and want to work for your organization versus spending all the time sorting through the applications and screening and figuring like that stuff is, you know, I mean, for me, and I started off my career as a recruiter, that's not fun. I think the future for recruiters, it's going to become much more fun. You're going to be able to do the fun stuff, personalize it, the strategy piece, and let the technology, be your assistant.
And the other thing about that is that not all potential candidates or not all potential talent are actually applying to your job. So there's always going to be the need for a recruiter or someone to go out, scour the internet, scour the social sites, and convince that person to apply to their organization. There's that personal touch that's needed. And there's also a lot of networking that needs to be done, especially for diversity recruiting. Your organization may want to develop relationships with different organizations and groups, and recruiters are really adept at that. So I agree, Jeanette, that's definitely more fun than all that administrative work.
Exactly. Great.
So the next question comes from Patrick. He said, great focus on predictive analytics for identifying candidates, but what about retaining the talent after they're hired? How are you using predictive analytics to see how well the talent is retained and developed? Thinking about the ROI there.
I think I can speak to that.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So there is an area of predictive analytics where they actually can predict which employees are likely to leave the organization or have some sort of burnout. So I guess there's a little controversy around that, whether, but the goal of that type of analytics is to be able to identify those employees and really help them see their career paths, their development opportunities, et cetera, so that burnout or that, resignation does not happen. So, I mean, that's one of the things that I've seen around predictive analytics and retention.
Absolutely. And it's interesting. One of the things we're doing at WCN, which we're working on, is not ready yet, is almost turning our predictive recruiting scoring on its head. So instead of just having an employer being able to see that, using it in a way where a candidate, when they start to look at different jobs, can get the information of, hey, this might be a great job for you. We're again working through it, but you can imagine it could be something like this would be a great match. And not just in the traditional matching. I know a lot of organizations might have you take a quick survey, but again, basing it really on true machine learning and information to say that these roles you have a high probability of doing really well in. And so we're working on that now, and I can imagine that being used not just for external candidates who are looking at roles in your organization, but also for internal candidates for mobility around an organization. So giving people the tools and information to help them decide, like, oh, well, actually, I do want to apply to this job. I didn't think of this, but it looks like I could be a great match and do really well. So I think to me that's the future. And we'll be rolling something like that out in the upcoming year. So I don't know, maybe we'll start thinking about it for internal use as well.
Another future leading question came in. What are leading companies trying to figure out today that you're expecting to produce important insights and shifts in hiring practices in the next year, 2 years, and more?
Could you repeat that question again?
Sure. What are some of the leading companies trying out today that you're expecting to produce important insights and shifts in hiring practices in the next year or two?
I think one of the things that I keep hearing a lot about and seeing from our clients in different levels is really full automation. And so what I mean by that is taking this predictive analytics and, again, we have the one client that I said, they 3-day time to hire, and taking that and pushing that out further, where I see a lot of people really thinking about how much of this can we really and truly automate, where there's less human intervention until late stages of the recruiting process. And so I think that is certainly where things are going. So from the instant that candidate applies, system does its thing and schedules them in for an interview, or schedules them in for, let's say, a video interview, and then from there the system does more automation, and if they pass certain criteria, then gets into a schedule for a final round interview, and then ultimately meet someone face to face. So I think having that sort of thing done very, very quickly. There was actually an article in the journal, I think last month, that outlined an organization doing this. So I think we'll see a lot more of that in the next year, 2 years, as organizations start to experiment with really trying to get things going faster. I don't know, Daria, what you're seeing or thinking about.
No, I agree with that. I think that's good. I think that organizations are probably trying to use predictive analytics to really understand their workforce better. What are the benchmarks for, which talent is going to succeed in which positions, which teams should work together. There's all these a myriad of questions that can be asked and can be determined using predictive analytics. So even like for team building, that's an area where predictive analytics are being used.
Okay, let's grab one more question, and they're asking a clarifying question. Is the WCN predictive scoring part of the applicant tracking system, or is it separate?
Well, that's a great question. So right now it is it's part of our applicant tracking solution. We call it Recruit. So it's an overlay onto that. And it also is available with our event product as well. I mentioned briefly earlier, we have a recruiting event product. So you can, we have organizations who have bought our intelligence product, overlaid it on our Recruit ATS or event as well. So right now it's not standalone. Maybe one day in the future, but right now it's part of you have to have our existing products. And I think the other interesting thing around that is, as far as we're aware, we're the only one that actually has it built in within an ATS or an event management tool. So, but who knows? As everyone else is developing new things. So right now we're the only one.
Great. So we are almost at the top of the hour, so I wanted to turn it back over to you guys for some closing thoughts. Anything last minute that you wanted to bring up?
Just so feel free to reach out to both of us to ask any question whatsoever. We'd love to engage with you and talk to you and help you answer any kind of question. And I look forward to hearing from you. Absolutely.
Echo Daria's words exactly. And we have up on screen, how you can contact us with questions or to learn more. We're all here and always happy to talk best practice.
And also one last plug here to go on to, we have a talent acquisition analytics survey that asks a lot of questions around these topics. So please feel free and just click away and answer the survey. It shouldn't take too long. We really appreciate it.
Okay, thank you both for a great webinar, and thank you for everyone that attended. You will get a playback of this webinar in your inbox within 24 hours, so feel free to share it with your colleagues. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.